About both iAccelerate but also the region that we're in and its Indigenous history. Over to you, please.
The I represents the individual, connected to the community, represented by the A. The sun is the mother and giver of all life. It is an important symbol of knowledge and power in Aboriginal dreaming. The sacred network of mountains, starting from Jira, also known as Mount Kira. This network spreads all the way down the south coast and into the highlands, from east to west. We are all connected. All us Mub are connected up and down the coast, through bloodlines and kinship. The country is actually what makes us all similar, because we live between the mountains and the sea. The scarred tree was something the artist had seen on her grandmother's country, near the snowy mountains. It was very similar to what is painted here. The scarred tree was a map. When you look at the towards a mountain, showing the younger man which way to go. The white-bellied sea eagle is a significant animal for coastal communities. The eagle is called Miringat in dreaming stories from Moruya. The eagle represents different things. Here we are, people that live off the land. We rely on country to feed us, but we also have to keep a balance with all other creatures, and we have a spiritual belief that our ancestors are represented through animals. They look after us and they guide us. The sea is significant to the region as it was one of the most reliable sources of food. The women are shown here, hand fishing from a canoe. They fished every day and they made their own hand hooks. Even though the men did their hunting, the fishing was still very important. The fish symbolises the abundance of food available in the area. The songlines are what connects our stories all up and down the coast. It represents the clans and communities. It is all of our stories. Even though they look like individual dots, on closer look, they are all connected. We are all connected. We have the same law and responsibilities to country.
And they'll get the ads because YouTube. So, welcome everyone. Welcome to the University of Wollongong. We've got an exciting and jam-packed agenda this morning. I'll be speaking to you in a short while about a concept and something that we can unpack in this workshop discussion here. But before we do that, one of the things that we would like to do is hear from one of our very long-standing partners here at the University of Wollongong. We have a 30-year partnership with Endeavour Energy. And yes, I used to be on the other side of that relationship when I was with Endeavour Energy. I'm now with the university. But we work with partnerships across industry and across this region here at the University of Wollongong. And in particular, we find that by bringing together and bridging that gap between traditional academia, between the community that we're embedded within, and between our industry partners, we can get those 1 + 1 + 1 gives more than 3 outcomes. So over to you, James, to take us through the journey that Endeavour's been going on in this space. Thank you.
Thanks, Ty. Really appreciate it. Just checking audio's all right for everyone in the room. Yep, beautiful. So yeah, lovely to be here and thanks very much for the invitation. So Endeavour Energy, I had a very detailed communique provided by Mark before as a bit of a pre-briefing to this, and I feel like a lot of people that have been involved in this process, I'm walking into the room quite late in the conversation. There's been a lot of problem statement and understanding of how the electricity industry works and some of the barriers and sort of problems that we're facing too. So I won't go too deep in terms of what Endeavour as a distribution network is, but I just wanted to provide a bit of an update really about what sort of initiatives we've been working on and some of the forward opportunities and potential plans that we're looking at to help sort of fill the gap in terms of the need to reach net zero and reach high renewable energy penetration in the electricity system, but also the whole Australian industrial complex. So Ty's done a great job of the acknowledgement there, and it's I would also like to extend my acknowledgement for the Darawal people who are standing on the lands of today. This is also a neat map to show you our network service area. So we look after, our network stretches all the way over the Blue Mountains to Wiradjuri country in the top left, Darug country in the northwest, Gundungurra just over the hills here towards Bowral in the southwest highlands, Darawal country where we are today, and the Yuin Nation down to Ulladulla. One of the projects, Bawley Point, I'll mention today is at the very southern tip of our network. Thanks. Yeah, sorry, I'm just going to stand it on camera now as well. I see now there's a screen so I can actually see up there too. some of the pilots that we've been working on that people might already know about, but I just wanted to highlight today. The first is Electrify 2515. So that's a very novel pilot where we're incentivising the electrification of households to switch off gas. And from the network side, look at all of the implications of doing so and how we can best manage that as well. So it's a combination of subsidies, residential household subsidies for people to switch from gas to electric appliances and to electrify their houses. And it's a stream of other things like rolling out better operation and monitoring equipment in the network so that we can see what the implications of that are. And undertaking research to study what the long-term impacts are, because we obviously don't want to lose all of the savings of electrification through increased network costs, so making sure that we're doing that as efficiently as possible. The second is community batteries, which in this election campaign at the moment, there's been a lot of announcements recently about this as a new sort of asset class that can value stack between what traditional network can benefit really from storage in the network. And it's an important use case where we're looking at how you can get the best out of market participation from storage, but also network support services through storage as well. Third one's a little bit of an underrated one, I think, in our mind, but something that we were involved in at the very outset was Off-Peak Plus. So this is essentially making better use of all that storage we've got in people's hot water tanks and making sure that when the old AFIC systems, the auto frequency injection controlled systems, which control hot water, can actually be managed a lot with a lot more intelligence to make sure that they're soaking up solar in the daytime and passing some of that participation into the market so that there's actually value for that as well. The fourth one, which I'll sort of talk to a little bit more today, is in the roundtable discussion, is our Bawley Point Community Microgrid. And one of the great novelties of this is actually working hand in hand with the community to address some of the concerns around resilience and working to integrate both networks parts of the solution, so increasing the network capacity, but also working with customer resources and building that in. And unfortunately, that's a novel thing in the industry to really start planning together on all of these things, but it is something that we've been very proud to truly have undertaken co-design with the community and achieve a successful project there. And then the final one, which there's been some announcements of in the last couple of months and working closely with another UOW product with GridSight, is about our flexible exports program. So this is moving from solar exports that are largely curtailed at 5 kilowatt export limits and trying to get more upside for customers, but also satisfy our increasing needs for run-back schemes in instances where that excess solar capacity is going to create grid stability issues. So I've got a bit of a summary chart here, which I won't go into in detail, but having read some of the previous materials about what the PSC Foundation's been working on, I think one of the key things for all of these different consumer energy resources and different asset classes is about going from making it relatively valuable infrastructure and it doing simple things in a non-connected way to making sure that we're doing as much as we can in value stacking all of these things so that we're doing things in a way that's future-proof, because we've always been able to solve the issues, but we don't often understand what the issues are until 10, 15 years down the track when we've got so much of these assets on the grid that we look back and say, it would have been nice to incorporate more control or something like that at those times too. The final thing I just wanted to talk to a little bit today was a proposal that we're working on with various partners and conversations with Energy Co, government, local government as well, which is all about call it the local energy hub, which is going to be a subject of the conversation in the roundtable today. I think we're calling a local CER marketplace, but there's a whole bunch of different ways. I think Climate Kick are calling it urban res. There's been a lot of changes around what we're calling this, but essentially it's recognising the need that we need a huge transformation of more renewable energy on the system, but we also need to acknowledge that there's not just an unlimited amount of money that customers are able to pay for this transformation. The transmission reses are a wonderful opportunity for us to streamline some of the planning and the problems that we've had in renewable energy deployment over the last 10 years. But they're also quite an expensive and challenging undertaking, as we've seen already with some of the delays for the res that we're involved in, the Central West Orana res as well. So the idea of this is really stemming from that and saying, well, there's actually a lot of capacity in the local networks here too, and it's the network that customers are already paying for. So what can we do to make sure that we're using that as at the greatest capacity to ensure an increased renewable energy uptake? So we've done some analysis that shows that there's up to another 3.5 gigawatts of capacity within the Endeavour network. Other networks are also seeing similar numbers around that too. So in order to meet the 18 gigawatt target, which New South Wales has, this is going to go a long way, we think, in terms of supporting that. But it's also, with the right partnerships, would be a great opportunity to address some of the inequities that we've seen develop over the last 15 years around home ownership, solar ownership, battery ownership, and address some of those systematic challenges, which we think solving these things locally and engaging with the community would be very beneficial. So we've got a proposal forward at the moment with EnergyCo. Happy to talk a little bit more about it today in the roundtable. But with that note, I'll probably leave it there and pass back to Ty. Thank you.
Thanks, James. Thank you. So if we're using this, okay, and apologies everyone, I got a bit carried away because the presentation logistics have thrown up the usual IT challenges for us this morning, and I should have actually, prior to handing over to James, actually invited Wayne up here for a quick rundown of us all, please, on an introduction to Australia 4.0, and then hand over to Ian from there. So over to you, Wayne. Apologies for me flying loose and free with our agenda.
That's great. I learned a lot just from the intro. Thank you very much. So I'm the chairman of the PSC Foundation, and along with a few others, the perpetrators of Australia 4. So just a little, I know many of you have heard this before, but the PSC Foundation is named after Trevor Pearcey, who in 1949, whilst at CSIRO and Sydney University, developed CIRAC, which was Australia's first fully digital computer in the a la Alan Turing model. And it was the world's third or fourth, depending how you see it. So pre-1950, there were only 3 that actually operated. Anyway, we felt Trevor was worthy of recognition as a true pioneer. And I have this saying, I get fed up with people saying, you know, we punch above our weight. We don't punch above our weight. We are leaders. And there's no two ways about it. So we're very keen to promote the ICT industry to Australia and Australians. And this is an example of trying to provide some leadership to the community that ICT is very important. And so today we're really here on what I'd call the Australia 4 journey, which many of you know a lot about. We've been at it for some years. We started in 2023 with 7 national roundtables in person and online, and we had, 1,500 people participate. So the role of the ICT industry in the transformation of the Australian electricity distribution network as we work towards achieving net zero is what we're here to talk about and discuss. At Australia 4, under Ian's leadership, we took a digital and data lens approach to analysing this challenge with a specific focus on ensuring the consumer agency is front and centre in this discussion. We know no apologies about that. And I would say that's pretty well a big issue on the table today, as we all know. Today's collaborative effort is timely, to say the least, thanks to the University of Wollongong. It's been great, and to Ty, thank you very much for the close collaboration to make this happen. Thanks to Endeavour Energy, and to all of you here and online for your participation. And many of you, as I said, have attended previous A4 sessions, but today's will be very special, I'm sure. So I'm very glad to be here in the Illawarra, and let's have a great day. Thank you.
And now just handing over, please, to Ian to take us through a bit of an overview of how to facilitate our exciting discussion here today. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Ty. Let me stand in the magic spot. So welcome, everyone. Welcome to Wollongong. This is the 5th in the series of roundtables where we're looking at, exactly as Wayne said, transition to net zero from the perspective of data and digital, so from the ICT perspective, where we are asking exactly the same questions, but from different perspectives each time. We're asking a question about what do we need to do in order to move towards net zero? What does the problem look like? What are the characteristics of the problem? And then how do we ensure that the consumer is at the center of this and not the product? How do we ensure that there's an opportunity for innovation, and in particular for Australian innovation? And really, what do we need to do? Who's doing the doing? Who's enabling the doing? How do we create an environment for trying, testing, and learning together? And how do we ensure that we can actually appropriately advocate for things that we really think need to change? We are not having the debate about nuclear versus solar. We're not having the debate about particular technologies. We're having the discussion about the transition to net zero, the elements that need to be in place, taking that line of data and digital and ensuring that the consumer is at the center and there's an opportunity for innovation. The consumer at the center is actually, it sounds really obvious. Every single business these days has a mentality around consumer at the center. Is it true for the transition to net zero? It's such a big, complex, challenging issue with so many stakeholders who are being forced to move into a different business model, into a different environment. At the same time, it's creating opportunities for new businesses. When we think about the addition of electric vehicles into the grid, or the massive uptake in Australia of solar, and the need for an existing infrastructure to be updated, brought into the 21st century, there are so many moving parts, and there are so many people who are just busy doing the thing that they're being instructed to do, doing the thing to try and meet policy objectives, doing the things that they need to meet the commitments that Australia has made. Asking people to think about the whole system is actually quite a big request. What we've been trying to do over the course of the last couple of years is say, we think the problem looks like this. We think the shape of the barrel looks like this. We think the individual elements we need to address look like this. And these are as many of the elements that we really think need to be considered in order for that barrel to hold water. So rather than looking at everyone's individual stave, everyone's little individual bit of the barrel, we're trying to imagine the barrel and trying to get people who wouldn't necessarily sit with each other, talk about their part and the barrel as a whole. Ultimately, what we're going to try to produce is a set of recommendations which we can give to policymakers so they can create the hoops for that barrel so it really does hold together. And by discussing this again and again and again and again from different perspectives, we're trying to work out whether or not we've got all the pieces that we need, whether this barrel really will hold water. You've been practicing this analogy, and whether or not we can actually put forward some genuinely useful, informed, discussed, synthesized recommendations rather than simple perspectives or things that have not been carefully thought through. I made a declaration at the last meeting, and I'll make another one. So since this process started, I have become the Vice President of the International Electrotechnical Commission, which is all about electrotechnology, which of course has a very large standards role to play in this space. And I've also become the Chair of the Commonwealth's Data Standards Committee, so I have responsibility for consumer data rights standards, which also are relevant to the energy sector, and digital identity. Just thought I would raise that issue just that you're aware. I'd like to also add my thanks to the University of Wollongong and the New South Wales Decarbonisation Innovation Hub who are hosting us today. We have, of course, during the course of these roundtables been hosted by the good folks at CSIRO, Engineers Australia, Race for 2030 and Standards Australia most recently. So the way these sessions always work is our host spends most of the first hour talking about which they care about most. And then we have a roundtable conversation where we will start with folks who've got little nameplates in front of them, and then we'll open it up to a broader conversation, but with a bias to action. This is the second last roundtable we're planning to have. The intention is identify who's doing the doing, identify who's enabling the doing, discussing the how do we try, test and learn.
Your microphone's off. And
No, I think the battery's gone flat.
Well, it may not be picked up online.
Apparently they can. But thank you for the note. And also, what should we appropriately advocate for? And at the end of every question, you'll be asked, and we should do what? As we start to lean into those set of recommendations that would actually help drive us forward. So without further ado, I'm hoping that today will be interesting, entertaining, and informative. And I'd like to hand back now to Ty. Cool. And you can continue talking to this if you like.
I think if they can hear me online, I might just project. That's all right. So thank you, and apologies again for my stuff up with the agenda. Anyway, so that's a really good setup, Ian. I'd like you all to indulge me now for a few minutes just to go on a little bit of a journey. There were so many hooks, it's almost like we rehearsed this. By the way, we didn't. In your intro there, what we're here to talk about. I think that's a real positive here because it shows the alignment between what we're doing. And while we might not always have 100% overlap with what Endeavour are wanting to put forward with what we'll talk about today, etc., I think this is a Venn diagram that's got a lot more in the overlap section and not very much in the individual organisational parts. In particular, the customer-centric part of it. Look, I can leave you to read that. I'm not going to self-promote the University of Wollongong. We've got banners here as well for the New South Wales VCARB Hub. Ask you all to engage with that, do your own looking up. But suffice to say, we're here at the university bringing together all aspects of academia and industry to try and address those meaty challenges of energy transformation, not just from the technical, but from the economic and in particular from the social perspective. One of the hooks that I'm picking up there, Ian, is I think one of the things missing in the dialogue is in many ways the technology of our energy transformation is already there. It's the social transformation, the regulatory and structural transformation that is the area of wanting for action. So if you could flip to the next one. Thank you. Seamless. The big button goes forward, I'm going to guess. Now, and picking up Wayne, your state loved it. We are leaders. One of the big challenges we have in energy transformation here in Australia, we have around 11 million homes in Australia. 4 million of them are now generators, generating solar power. I get asked a lot, well, what's happening internationally? What can we learn from overseas in the energy transition journey? And the answer is, if we look overseas here in Australia, then we are looking 10 years into the rearview mirror. There is no textbook for what we are doing, and there is no reference point globally for what exists today in energy transformation here in Australia. Now, that largest transformation that's occurred in our energy transition has occurred very rapidly and very recently. It has not occurred through the direct actions of any of the large market incumbents, whether they're network companies, sorry to single you out there, James, or whether they are our beloved retailers or the large-scale generators. And it certainly hasn't occurred through any of the action of industry regulators, whose only real danger is that they'll be mowed down by a glacier, given the pace that they move at. The transformation that's occurred in our energy landscape has occurred as a result of us, of individual homeowners and individual citizens taking a modicum and significant amount in some cases of control over their own energy supply and investing their own capital in putting solar on the roofs of their homes. So the energy grid of the past, as you see crudely in the slide here, basically involved power flowing one way through an electricity grid from a small number of generators, less than 100 of them across all of the interconnected electricity grid and arriving at end users, homes and those sorts of things. The energy grid of today has 4 million generators and energy flowing every which way in real time as we speak. What that means is all of the rules, all of the regulations, all of the 1,000 pages plus that are out there of the National Electricity Law are all there, still largely unchanged from when they were articulated just over 30, 35 years ago, and they are all perfectly designed for a grid that no longer exists. And so that's the most simple diagram that I've been able to find that explains how the interactions for it. Don't even try and read it. It confuses me, and I've spent 40 years in this industry. But suffice to say, it's a challenge, and we're dealing with a legacy of a lot of structural issues. What it really comes down to is where we get into the meat of this. So thank you for indulging the scene setting. Now we get to the real meat of the discussion here. what we have is two things that are going on every minute of every day. And hopefully I won't mess up my standing on the spot. I'm going to deviate slightly from the spot. Sorry about this. Hopefully they can hear me online. Two things happening in parallel. Physics. All the grid works based on physics. All of the electricity and everything obeys the laws of physics. And then we also have some stuff that's completely made up called economics. And that's how all of this gets monetized and how the grid works. Newsflash for everyone, the grid will still work even if you don't have any of the other stuff because it only obeys the laws of physics. But how that's manifesting now is we have this artificial construct of a single, completely imaginary thing called the wholesale energy market. And it's based on this construct that all electricity and all electrons are equal, and they all, in an imaginary sense, flow into this one big lake, this one big pool, the wholesale energy pool, and are then drawn from that pool by people as energy users. That's not how the physics works. That's how the economics of the national energy market work. Again, important to have that as a baseline. Now, as you can see, some brilliantly rendered drawings that we can see in all of this. But here's what's actually happening out there in the grid. And this isn't a hypothetical, and I'm not trying to make this about me or anything, but this could be Chateau Christopher, where I live, and these are my neighbours because I have solar on my home and they don't. The physics of what's going on at the moment, right now it's a sunny day, my home is consuming the solar that it generates, exporting what it can't use, and due to physics, specifically Ohm's law and Kirchhoff's current law for the energy geeks like me in the audience, the energy leaving my house is turning right and left and supplying number 4 and number 8 out of number 6 where I live. That's the physics of what's going on. The current energy markets don't mean I'm getting paid because of this imaginary wholesale pool. I'm getting paid 5 cents a kilowatt hour to export my energy into the imaginary pool. My neighbours are then getting charged 35 cents a kilowatt hour to buy their energy from that imaginary pool on the assumption that my electrons have somehow traversed tons and tons of electricity network to get to this pool thing and then have to come back through all of that network and incur all of the charges as well as the voracious profit margins of our beloved energy retail companies. Do you hear what I'm saying here? There is a massive disjoint now between the practical physics of what's going on in energy supply and the fit and the appropriateness of the markets that we've got in place to actually monetize and serve all of this. And we will get to what that means in a moment. So why is electricity so expensive? These are screenshots. Don't believe me. Don't believe any politicians, any of them. Go to Open Electricity. It's a free website. It's sitting there. It tracks in real time electricity prices and the sources of generation for electricity. Open, it used to be called Open NEM. I think they've rebranded it appropriately. It's called Open Electricity. It's dead accurate. It's just a real-time feed from the national energy market from this imaginary pool system. 2 screenshots here that show going back a few days when I did this. The important thing is every time you pick a vertical line, the ones in the top part of the graph there, where wholesale electricity prices are at a minimum, what you'll see is a dominance of renewables. That's the yellow, solar and green, wind and those sorts of things in there. Every single time you see a price spike, prices are at their maximum, go across and look at the graph, it says what's the mix of energy coming into this wholesale market at that point in time, it will be dominated by coal and gas. 100%, all the time. So any person of any persuasion who is out there and says to you that renewables are expensive or renewables are driving up our electricity prices, there's lots of great words for it now. They call it misinformation, they call it disinformation, they call it gaslighting, I'm so old, I remember when it just used to be called lying. That's the facts, everyone. Now, what that means for our households is this. Solar in Australia is the cheapest energy that you can ever have to power your private life. These aren't my slides. These are from my friends in Rewiring Australia. And what they show is the marginal cost. It's gone up slightly due to interest rates and cost of living movements, but it's around 3 to 5 cents a kilowatt hour is the true cost of putting solar on your home and powering your home using that. What that means, and the big challenge for us, is the traditional models to monetize electricity have two fundamental components to it. One, the cost of purchasing that energy from this imaginary wholesale market, and two, the cost to pull that energy through an entire transmission network and electricity distribution network to eventually arrive at a customer's household. What that means is, that when you compare the traditional wholesale pool concept to what's actually going on, given that you can produce the power in the street for 3 cents a kilowatt hour, even if you had a magic generator that could produce power entirely for free, while ever you have to wheel it through the entire electricity network, you've still got 10 cents worth of charges to be doing that. So it's still 3 times as much to work with the concept of a centralised electricity pool that you're pulling power through, when that's actually not how the physics are going on, than it is to locally share and locally generate electricity. Which leads to, and this is the main discussion point, and this is where, from a PC perspective, we really start unpacking okay, how would we actually do this differently? What about a world where the engineer in me says, let's take the whole national electricity market and say, well, that was a failed experiment that didn't deliver for customers, let's start again. But there are too many billions of dollars of profits and multi-billion dollar companies who only exist because of all those rules and regulations for that to actually be a practical or political way forward. But what about a major step, and a major step that brings closer alignment between the physics of what's going on and the economics of how we monetize it? And that practical step is, instead of just having an electricity network that has one great big wholesale pool, it has little local energy networks, and those local energy networks operate financially. I've called it a pond because that's a smaller pool. You can call it whatever you want. And local renewable energy zone, a local renewable energy network, a local energy network, a virtual energy network. We can debate till the cows come home. You know, we call it KEP. Doesn't matter what the name is. The concept of it is, what we could do here is say, with some storage on the grid side of things, with the community batteries that my friend and colleague James was talking about here, we introduce into this local energy area the ability to store up the energy when it's in surplus and then pump it back into the local community when usually the sun's gone down. Would that mean that that part of the grid, call it a suburb postcode perhaps, would that mean that that part of the grid could be disconnected from the upstream grid? Absolutely not. This isn't about grid autonomy. This is about grid light compared to what it is now in many ways. And this is about better monetizing the way that we share locally generated clean energy. One of the things that's not spoken about openly enough, I think, and because it is a difficult and thorny challenge for us, is how much this brilliant transformation we've done in Australia has created and will continue to entrench energy inequity between the haves and the have-nots in our communities, and access to locally generated clean energy for renters, for people in social housing, for apartment dwellers is the missing part of our energy transformation at the moment. What happens is people who are affluent enough to afford a roof and solar to put on it are paying less and less for their energy. And while there are regulated revenue caps for businesses within this, particularly the transmission and distribution network companies, that means they're recovering that total amount of money over a smaller and smaller base, and that base is dominated more and more by those who can least afford it. Social housing, renters, etc. So by going to a local energy pond, then that very, very inexpensive energy that's being generated can be stored locally and shared locally at a heavily discounted rate. My modelling and that of Rewiring Australia, Saul Griffith and his people, indicate that this could easily be achieved while delivering around a 25% reduction in our current energy bills to each and every household, including the one with solar, but more importantly, including all of the ones that don't have solar within a local energy network. Now, the pond will run dry, and the pond will probably run dry in this concept about once every 24 hours, but it will run dry in the wee small hours of the morning where who cares? And until the sun comes up again, and from the small hours of the morning, you will be reliant on the traditional grid. So that's a great idea, Ty. Yeah, fantastic. How are we going to make that to happen? Now I'm really picking up, Ian, what you're talking about. So let's get into the practicalities here. What is going to be needed? Well, we do have some capability out there. We have smart meters, hold the data once a day. So I'm not sure how really smart they are. They're kind of just recorders that are out there. But we do have a source of data. What we will probably need is real-time data on actual power flows. And depending on whether you want to deal this as the way the main energy networks work, settling and adjusting every 5 minutes or every 15, I think that's a discussion that needs to be had. But the bottom line is what this will create is a need for a significant amount of ICT capability in order to control, manage, monitor, and allow the physics and the economics to be brought more closely together in local energy ponds. That's something I think worthy of our time, worthy of our discussion, and something I think is very much on brand for the agendas of the PSC Foundation. So there is a very quick rundown of that concept of what a local energy network, local energy pond, bringing together at a local level the physics and the economics for the benefit of consumers and not, dare I say, for the benefit of energy retailers. Without beating them up, they're not here in the room to defend themselves, but the facts are readily available. You just have to go on a popular search engine. In the year from 2023 to 2024, when energy prices did go up, the profits of the big three energy retailers, I won't name Origin, AGL and Energy Australia as the big three energy retailers, their profits collectively went up by around $2 billion. That's not their total profit. That's how much their profits went up by year on year. And we all want to ask the question, why are our energy prices going up and ever upwards? Maybe there's an answer in there. I'd like to hand back now for facilitated discussion. Please, over to you, Ian.
Thanks very much. So, just updating my LinkedIn post. Presentation. I'm now.
So thank you very much.
Oh, my apologies. Sorry. This is handed over to DNA Energy first. Sorry, just a second.
Let's call on DNA Energy.
I do have a couple of questions for you.
Yeah. Felt like a good time for Q&A, to be honest.
I did have a couple of questions that have come in on the Slido. Do you want to leave those to after Dina?
Let's hear from Daniel.
Yep.
I think there's some good input there, and then the questions might have more than just me to answer.
Yep. We'll keep the police from coming in the front door to arrest you.
Thank you.
Didn't say that.
Thanks everyone. I don't have a bunch of pretty pictures.
Like the predecessor.
Information.
And we
Assets like air console,
back to
all that kind of stuff. That's storage when it hits the cloud. And the reason we do that cornerstones is to make the network operators. And I think if you're not digitizing everything to move forward. Talk very briefly, DSR, New South Wales government project here. The DEEF project, construction, stability, we've been running for a couple of years now. The general idea is a whole bunch of hot water and on the it isn't solar. Asset. And we're going to get a whole bunch of buildings, 5 megawatts, and the blow. That's cool.
Hi, sorry to interrupt. There's definitely an issue with the microphone just now. It's dropping in and out.
Definitely not using it, so that's probably the issue. Hello, is that better?
That's great, thank you.
Is that okay now? I'll assume that's a yes on the audio. I promise.
Yes, it is. Yes, it's working well.
Good. Thank you. I did promise non-flashy. We have a control system interfacing with the Siemens BMS at building 233, which I can't point to, but somewhere very close to here, over there, I'm told by Tim. The idea is that we are controlling the chiller for some cool demand response. You can see where we did the red line load drop. Chillers don't do what you want them to do because of their cycling, their compressor cycling. Ultimately, this will interface with the battery that's being installed under the ARENA Community Test Program, and it will demonstrate how, by using it as a digital node, we're going to get an extra 10% utilization out of that battery, which is huge because in terms of business cases and value stacking, 10% turns it from squeaky bum, not quite going to work, to actually, yes, we can make that work. I'm going to move on to a project that we're really proud of, actually. It's with a retailer, but one we quite like, Momentum Energy, not one of the big three for sure. Momentum Energy, who's also the retailer to University of Wollongong, of course, as you guys will know. This project's been running for about 2 years. We're controlling 22 different aircon systems at an aged care site in Queensland from Uniting Care. So just turning them all into digitized nodes. We're measuring each phase of each condenser every second and providing that data through API to Momentum Energy. You can see where the top line is a trigger price. The dotted line is a trigger price of $500. This is a real graph from a real day. When AEMO publishes their prices and the price is above 500, it hits Momentum's cloud, hits our cloud, hits site controller, hits node controller, hits aircon condenser. And within about a second, that asset is being controlled. And so that's really cool. You're using real-time data, so it's heavily quantified, which we think in the digitization part, you mentioned the previous slides of, the woeful daily download, which is absolutely pointless, to be honest with you. If you know every second what's going on of that asset, of that phase, that's where you start to use this digitizing for real good. The next version of this, which we're just releasing now, which we think the type of stuff we're doing, no doubt, Mel, you're doing similar kind of stuff, when it's mass rolled out, is incorporating a whole of site strategy into that. And so we can take a trigger from ancillary markets, from wholesale markets, from behind the meter demand. James could send us a CCPOS signal and everything goes into the controller, and the controller makes the decision based on predetermined priorities of what should happen. And we'd like to think that all buildings are smart. They're not. We specialize in commercial industrial. They're nearly all dumb, to be honest with you. Virtually no commercial buildings have got true smarts in there. And you have generators and heat pumps and irrigation pumps and aircon and refrigeration and generators and all of these things in their best life. The idea that you can control all those based on a preset list of priorities from an unlimited amount of signals is the way the grid transforms. And I think without it, we don't stand a chance, basically. So that's my little presentation. Love to have some questions. How do you model it? That is a great question. We get 5-minute data from the retailer. We look at demand charges. We work a lot on the 80-20 rule and iteration. We can look at most buildings and say, here are the opportunities. We know how to control these assets. You have to accept, though, that until you're in the building controlling it, you never really know. 80-20 is normally a good formula to work with, though.
And how far to deliver this flexibility?
I think tariffs is a whole different question, and we would like, my version of that is we will work around tariffs. I think it's for people like James and the retailers to decide how well they're working, to be honest with you. Our view as a tech company is to work within the current tariff structure and make the building work better within it. But yes, I think the carrot is a good answer. I just don't have a view on how the tariffs should work themselves. I know you do, Tim. Yeah, I've seen your LinkedIn posts.
To actually.
Yeah, for sure. So this site has made about $17,000 in 1 year. That's based on an average of about 150 kilowatts of dispatchable load, which is pretty good money. If you equate that to a battery, it's very, very good value because the assets are already there. The way the retailer works on it, it's just the arbitrage between 500 trigger price and the ordinarily exposed cost that they would have been exposed to when they settled with AEMO. There's a bunch of software in there as well, which is really part of the conversation. I know, Tim, you've got a lot of opinions about this. You can't just say smash it when you want. You can't just say smash it when you want to smash it. You've got to be able to have some controls around that. And so we put contingencies for the user. Hey, we will work within this temperature band or within these parameters. You also have to protect the retailer. You can't have price spikes when they've already agreed to pay something, as of July 1st, that's going to be 20,300. And so you have to have lots of software in there and contingencies. Everyone has to have an opt-out button. But if you're not digitizing everything like that, most of the value is being left on the table. Anybody at home?
Or systems? Are they for results and savings, but is there a rule system? The way the current
most, yeah, but basically a customer's looking to save money or make money, yeah, and how does that fit into the current market construct? Most customers start off wanting to save money, or they've got a new building, there's a lack of supply, the DNSP won't give them more, it's too much or too long to wait for, so we fit that with a load management piece. That's quite a common piece and a very valuable grid growth piece, we think. The retailer blockage is where the revenue challenge comes in. Very few retailers have got their head around it, to be honest with you, around how to monetize it. They also have different trading strategies. Some have got a supply demand problem, some are fully spot exposed, some have got a shape profile problem. And so there's no real standardized way of going through it. And that's part of the challenge of monetizing it. I think over the years, this will change, and we're working with the retailers as other people are. But I think they've got to come to the party with some standardization around how that's done.
Yeah, John from Combined Energy on an arena project with NLX, which is FCAS with refrigeration. What this brings out, there's a huge amount of capital in the grid that can be controlled now that very easily can be converted over to network services without a huge cost. With it, and 600 large-scale refrigeration, super, Murphy's and that type of thing, where they bought their refrigeration units into the 1 second FCAS market.
Yep.
For the owners and very useful for the grid. But existing assets are underrated in the overall equation.
Yeah, I agreed. And I think, Mal, you and I would agree that the DNSPs went through a big non-network solutions or non-wired alternatives as it is in the US a few years ago. The technology just wasn't there then to do it. And I think now the technology really is there to turbo it, because you can add in price volatility from wholesale markets. I think the retailers and the DNSPs talking to each other is a challenge, which can be solved by a CSIP type of solution. But yeah, I think now is the time to start looking at that value stack. Who's top of the tree? How can we value stack it? And how does everyone win?
What role do you see AI and AI agents?
What? Yeah.
Sorry, I'll ask again. It was just a cheeky one, but
Yeah.
I just wondered what role you see AI and AI agents perhaps playing as an intermediary or enabler in the process.
An epic role, actually. We've started to look at it. We're speaking with UNSW about a few things, Ren. I'd love to talk to people here about it as well, possibly, around how you do that and how you just put everything on steroids. Currently, we're taking a 5-minute view. Every 5 minutes, we're looking at it and we're taking a signal and we're getting the data every second. We could get it every 20 milliseconds and we could take a view every half a second, and, the idea that you can massive all the information that's coming is I'm always going to add in around certainty of information with AI, and I think it's a really serious consideration to put in there. Algorithms are pretty accurate and don't fail as long as they're set up right. I think AI is a different kind of beast, and I think you have to be aware of it. But conceptually, yes, at least if it's taken off 70% of the heavy lifting of things, I think it's a great tool. I love a spreadsheet personally. Spreadsheets never lie. So, yeah.
I can understand that acquiring lots of data helps you make better decisions. Where I'm a bit confused is if it's a 45-degree day in Queensland, you still have to keep the air conditioners running at the same rate. So how does it help you make better decisions when you actually have real-world physical constraints working against you?
For sure. It's about what the way we do it. I'm sure, Cam, you have a similar approach, is we create a box with the customer, and the box says, as long as it's inside this, we can do it. And so the box might be, never use that machine, only operate between internal temperature of 22 to 25, never run that asset for more than a certain amount of time. And if it's 45 degrees and 70% humidity, people are probably dropping dead in the streets. It just doesn't work. And you can't break the laws of science. And sometimes the networks just will be constrained. But there's normally something you can do. There'll be a non-essential load somewhere that you can do, and the box might have something else that doesn't have to run at a certain time. Or you might know that it's going to be 45 degrees, so you're not reactionary, you're preventative by doing more cooling. I'm a big fan of cold storage. I'm a big fan of having spare tanks for chillers for exactly moments like this. So you can pre-cool at 7 in the morning when the sun's blasting, when it's going to be 45 degrees, and keep that cool air in the system to disperse it later. And so these are all technology problems that are brilliant to solve.
Machine learning, and we just.
Sorry. We've got microphone as we move. We try and go back to Ian.
Yeah, we use the concept of machine learning through observation, and we found things like they pack the refrigeration at certain times in the morning, and we find that the system then is taken out of action, and when we aggregate all of the freezers up to the control system, it's just a reduced capacity for a few hours until the freezer picks up again because it's let a lot of the cool air out. And so we don't program that. It just learns and goes, okay, they pack the shelves between 5 and 6, between 6 and 8. We can't use that fridge for FCAS. Etc. So it eventually just learns the system.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right. Let's see how we go. So, I don't need this. So now we get into the fun part. So a couple of very interesting, or a few very interesting presentations there. And the making physics behave like economics or economics behave like physics is a really interesting point. I've always thought that economics was an interesting science. You notice my air quotes around science, where you assume you have a can opener and then you can open the can. But of course, there are some interesting points there. One of the challenges we have primarily in this conversation to date is it's been said that we are technical people talking to technical people. The point about educating the consumer, or the point about keeping the consumer at the center, is one of the critical things that we really, really need to think about when we're having these conversations. We've got a thematic issue to dig into in this roundtable, which is life cycle energy management, which I'm going to ask a few folks around the table if they wouldn't mind offering a view. Alternatively, what I'd like you to do, if I tap you, and if you've got a name tag, I'm going to tap you to begin with to start this conversation. And Mal, to be fair, I'm going to start with your good self. If you don't want to speak about life cycle energy management, what I would like you to do is offer your views about what you've heard, how this moves the conversation forward. How do we ensure that we do keep the customer, the consumer, at the center of this conversation? And how do we ensure there's an opportunity here for innovation, in particular for Australian innovation? So 2 choices, either life cycle energy management, which is simple and straightforward, or a difficult question about consumer, innovation, Australia, data. Mal, over to you.
Okay.
Just a few statements, please.
I think the first thing, I really am a big believer in this energy pool approach. Microgrids is another concept, all very similar things. What we've missed, though, is a parallel architecture for the command and control system. We currently have clouds connecting independently, maybe 2 or 3 clouds connecting independently into the home, controlling individual assets. And I believe the topology of the control has got to follow the topology of the energy supply. There's no reason why we can't have a CSIP server sitting at a substation.
By the way, if you use an acronym for the first time, could you please expand it?
Okay, CSIP is it's a new protocol. It's a IEEE 2030.5 protocol. CSIP is another name for it, which is the Common Smart Inverter Protocol.
Yeah, just for the sake of those who don't know, just expand it, then yep. Please keep on with your thought.
So the concept here is the DNSPs will have a server. The server will compute different, take data in from the grid and compute operating envelopes for an individual connection point for your home. That's transmitted from the CSIP server to a client on the site and will set limits of how much you can export or how much you can import at the time. So if you looked at that, the concept of trading energy locally in a pool, what you're trying to do is balance the energy across all the homes. How much can the solar systems export? How much can you consume? If you can tell the home next door to consume more power because you've got the ability to export it, that's a great thing. You can, and so that local control system, I think, is a really good way, a good architecture to head on, or a journey. We don't have this architecture at the moment. We've got very hybrid architectures. Really, your NBN modem should have been an energy management system. If we thought about it, smart meters should have been the energy management system. They're not. So we've lost those opportunities. But I think we've got to build on an architecture like that. The second point is for homeowners to contribute their assets, their existing assets to the grid. There's 2 things that they need to get. It needs to be cost effective. So we always look at this concept of dollar to control a kilowatt or a kilowatt hour on a device, and we try and drive that down. Existing assets can be converted into a control asset much, much cheaper than putting in expensive new assets like batteries. Not against batteries, but you've got air conditioning, water heaters, pool pumps, pool heaters that are all sitting there, very cheap and easy to control, and can have a big impact on the grid. Ultimately, when you run out of battery, you need to control these things anyhow, so they're needed at some point. And so I think that's the second part. And the third part is, how does the consumer, how do they get rewarded for contributing their assets? And we saw that there's a bit of inequity here because the people who've got the money to put the control systems in are the ones who are going to benefit, and those are left over are going to take all the costs. So that's a big problem we need of how that equity transfer is managed.
Thank you. And could I now do exactly what I said earlier and leave you with the question, or ask you the question, and we should ... What should we do?
Well, we should, as a group, I think we've got a great opportunity to forge a system architecture document that is mandated across the grid. From an IT perspective, it's missing, and everyone's trying to build these systems on top of a house of cards at the moment. We don't have a backhaul strategy that's consistent. We don't have a security model that's consistent, and we don't have a system architecture command and control system that's consistent. We've got local, we've got edge computers, we've got cloud computing, cloud control. It's a hodgepodge and it's not scalable. I think that's get the foundation right. Innovation will take over and we'll be in a great position. But at the moment, it's a free for all from companies who are trying to extract revenue, and they just do it as cheap as they can, whichever way they can, without any consideration for a really strong foundation.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. For those playing on at home, there is a Slido that you could put questions up, and there is someone monitoring the Slido. The Slido number is 2781283. I've never wanted to be a bingo caller, but that sounds a little bit like that. 2781283. Now, staying with the folks.
Hey, Ian, just sorry to interrupt. The link is in the chat also for the people online. If you go to the chat, you'll find the link to Slido there.
Excellent. Thank you, Colin, for that intervention. Now, staying on this side of the room, folks with name cards, would like you to either pick up the conversation where Mal left off with a call for the need for a system architecture, or feel free to answer or provide your own views on this life cycle energy management, or the other discussion point was customer at the centre, innovation, Australia, access to data. Kate, could I ask you to pick up, please?
Thanks very much, Ian. From my perspective, which is very broad and not from a sort of technical engineering view, the real issue is solving the mystery for the consumer and allowing them to make informed decisions about their choices in the home. I think one of the opportunities that is coming is, and I want to use the pond analogy, is what are the buckets that you can use to refill the pond? And if you think of vehicles and the vehicle to grid possibilities, whatever we're designing now should be able to accommodate that opportunity for portable batteries to be able to move around to support whatever people are doing in their homes. I think it's sort of leaning right into a future, but if we're not designing a system now to be able to accommodate that kind of input into the system, we're missing a big trick. The other aspect from a consumer perspective is that's a lot easier to understand conceptually, that you can manage power in and out of the grid. But if you have a vehicle that constitutes a battery, it kind of makes it real in a practical way. So how you channel that information into the consumer's hands and help them make informed decisions right now, I think, is the precursor to whatever, the architectural system of information sitting behind it, the organisation of the markets sitting across the physics. We've got to be able to translate that into practical examples of solutions that people can actually relate to and start to do their analysis of, because no spreadsheet or AI algorithm is ever going to fix that problem.
Thank you. And it is remiss of me, I'm sorry. Could I ask you to just introduce yourself very quickly and then answer the question or finish this question, and we should ...
Yep. So I'm a member of the Pusey Hall of Fame from way back. I've done a lot of work in the past on information and communication technology policies. Feels like a very long time ago. One of my current roles at the moment, however, is a director of NRMA Motoring and Services, and we expend our social dividend on building the national EV network designed to create the impetus and to solve range and time to charge anxiety across the EV network as our contribution towards net zero. And we, from a mutual point of view in supporting members, we do think a lot about what it means for EVs to contribute to energy use in our members' homes. It's a bit out there. We haven't got a plan, but I thought this was a great place to come and learn and listen and understand more about how the market functions. And I've learnt an enormous amount already. So thank you, Ian.
And we should?
Oh, we should build a system that provides for the opportunity to plug vehicles into the pond going forward, because that could fill that last bit, but it could also augment and stabilise the energy flows in the pond going forward. It's 60 kilowatts of stuff just sitting there.
Thank you. All right, we're going to continue on around, and I'm going to pick on someone now in an appropriate and respectful way. Dwayne, if you could just quickly introduce who you are, very quickly, and then either life cycle energy management or pick up the conversation or Consumer Data Innovation Australia.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. I'd like to pick up perhaps where Mel left off. I might just, if Lucinda, if you could, bring up my slide. But Dwayne Robinson, Director of the Power Quality Research Centre here at the University of Wollongong. I don't need to be on the camera. I don't think I've got enough time.
Post it later.
You're famous.
I'm surrendering my dot to you.
And just the clicker as well. That one. Yep. Just back one, please, Lucinda. Thank you. Can I go back? Yeah. Okay. So as part of the Power Quality Research Centre, which is partially funded by Endeavour Energy, which is great, but we're actually building one of these microgrids that Mel had talked about earlier. When we say we're building it, a lot of the components are already there. A lot of these inverter infrastructure, we've already got batteries in our building. We've already got the air conditioning system tied very closely into the BMS. We're already working with Daniel and his team on this project. This is one of the exemplar buildings that's actually being included in that project as well, through to the various controls. So, but getting back to your question, what should we be doing next? So this microgrid is all about the doing. It's all about developing the necessary technologies to mesh everything together, which is, I think, Mal's point. And then finally, to use it as an advocacy tool. So what do we need to do? What problems do we identify? And what do we need to do next? So we're actually installing some batteries. Well, we've got some batteries in the building, as I mentioned, some significant batteries, about 600 kilowatt hours, about 450 kilowatts in the near future. As I mentioned, we've got some technologies in the building. This is a genuinely smart building. Daniel mentioned there aren't many around. This is a genuinely smart one. We have 44 energy meters throughout the building monitoring everything in the building. We have a BMS that we're able to tie into through various mechanisms as well. We're just about to get a Siemens A8000 microgrid controller embedded into this, which will need to tie into the building management system as well, which is a JACE controller for those who are familiar with BMS building management systems. And then we've got lots and lots of solar, both on our building and on adjacent buildings as well. In the picture, you can actually see that we tie into what's called the Illawarra Flame House, which is the little residential house that you can see just beyond the balcony. So please have a look at that before you leave today. 2 residential houses, both with batteries, embedded batteries, both with solar, thermal energy storage in in both of those buildings, as well as some tie into the hot water system as well. So some of those systems, we are already starting the development of these technologies. The vintage of those buildings, one was built in 2013. So we've been doing this for quite a while. The second one was 2018 vintage. But our microgrid ties only not our own building, but these residential buildings, so we can demonstrate that. And also some commercial buildings on this site as well. I will finish up, Ian, sorry. No, I'm taking a fair bit of time here. But I think this is what Mal was talking about. We've got a lot of systems here which all need to mesh together. They don't at the moment. That's, I think, the clear message. they do not mesh in. So the network signals that we are designing for our microgrid to receive from the local DNSP, Endeavour Energy, is a different system to the system that we're using for our building management system. That's a different system to even our microgrid controller. So all these things need to talk to each other. If we introduce an energy or a component resource aggregator, as Daniel demonstrated earlier, which we can utilize in this building, again, that's another system layered into all these ICT technologies. So part of this is part of what we're trying to do is demonstrate how we mesh all these things together, as well as do all the economic analysis, understand what happens with the physics. And I think I'll probably finish there, Anne, just to make sure everyone else has got enough time.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. All right, so let's continue to work our way around this part of the room first, and then we'll move on. So, James, I'd like you to pick up on the threads of the conversation or life cycle energy management.
I think maybe starting with the and we should, being clear about what we're referring to. I think we've used different terminology for the same principle a few times here about talking about energy ponds, and life cycle energy management, I think, is trying to get into that as well. So from both in terms of us as technical experts, being able to make sure we're talking about the same things because we love the nuance, but also for consumers, they find it very confusing if we're not baking in these ideas, and that's part of the challenge, I think, too. My background is a renewable energy engineer, and I spent my first job actually doing microgrids in the Pacific, and microgrids in the Pacific are a lot simpler in many ways. There's a lot of challenges in deploying in remote islands in Kiribati and things, but vertically integrated markets, government ownership, retail markets that are very simplified compared to what we've got here. Some of the places like Tokelau were able to get it to 93% renewable energy using just lead acid batteries in some stages, which is a technology that we've obviously come a long way from. But the reason we were working there was because the cost of energy was so high that these things still made sense. You were still able to get away from $1 a kilowatt hour when you diesel fed grids as well. The reason I bring that up is I think the more I reflect on my career and now working for a network company and trying to get more renewables into the network too, is just how complex we make it around the regulatory regime and the reform that needs to happen here. I think a lot of the challenges that have been talked about so far are actually regulatory rather than ICT based, and we need to probably try and hone in on what is the ICT problems here. And I think Dwayne's point just then was exactly it. Like in my experience in engineering systems is it's not so much about buying the technology, it's making sure that you've got a plan around how to integrate everything. And that's been our experience in places like Bawley Point, which is the microgrid we've got working down there. Various different stakeholders. The community engagement thing was really hard, but actually also getting our systems to talk and work together is the real challenge. So I think, maybe the concluding thing on the and we should is just being very specific about what we're trying to talk about and what problems we're trying to solve. And sort of saying it will be possible, but we also need to make sure that we're working together to think about how things are going to talk to each other in the long run. And that's increasingly important with, I know Tim's a big advocate for moving to dynamic pricing and things that are putting on more data and more potential value chains and things, but we also need to make sure that we've got the basics working too in this sort of interconnected world.
Right. We're going to try something here. Could you pass the microphone to your left, first of all? And Tim, I'll get you to introduce yourself quickly in a moment, but then, just fair warning, Kate, I'm going to pass back to you to talk about the two really big and we shoulds have come up. One's the system architecture, one is regulatory simplification or development. The question I'm going to ask you both is, who should do that? How do we do it? So please contemplate while Tim is introducing himself, and then speaking to the topic.
So Tim Ryan, I'm on the committee for the Australia for work of Piercy, and a consumer advocate trying to, I suppose, deliver a lifetime experience in data and information and high-speed transactions, etc., which bizarrely comes largely from the wagering space, which we're all trying to have a bet on how energy will work. I suppose the point I'd like to start from here about just bringing things together is we need to understand that the network functionalities and what we need the network for are very different from the price of energy at any point in time. And there's too much conversation at the time trying to get to a point that says this is the price of energy, when what causes the price we pay is both the energy and the delivery. So Ty's great example of numbers 4, 6 and 8 on the even side of the street doesn't necessarily explain how power might have got to the odd side of the street, or the fact that they're connected, or how those things all work together. So our role of the network is becoming much more an insurance line perspective. So purely thinking of what Ty was getting paid in 5 cents a kilowatt hour and the person next door was paying in 30 cents, ignored the fact that Ty had paid a lump of money, perhaps not enough, for his network service and his connectivity and ability to do that, and what the consumer was paying. So a lot of what I focus on is trying to work at how we can get productivity from the network, and crucially, how we can get energy cost efficiency. In other words, energy efficiency is great, but energy cost efficiency is far more important to the consumer being able to save. And one of the examples of that is something like domestic hot water, where we've seen that moving from nighttime energy, ripple control, and the historical thing of how loads were managed in that environment, moving to the middle of the day can dramatically save costs. At the moment, unfortunately, the parties that are doing that control under controlled load environments of the old technology, they're pocketing the money. Their test for the consumer is simply, did you get hot water? And, excuse me, we got hot water, so it really doesn't really matter. You might have saved a few bob, but we as a retailer made 8 times that. And that's what the example of the Plus ES AGL trial in South Australia did. And I noticed that number 2 on James's list was actually this Energy Plus, or hot water, flexible hot water stuff. It's 30% of our bills, so it's a huge saving. So what we need to do is thinking about how we can make it more useful, how we use our capacity, and how we save. Consumers can save. We've used the word value stacking a few times today. Any value stacking from a business sense means money out of some consumer's pocket. It's just that's how it works. Like, end of the day, all the bills come back to consumers. So if we come up with solutions, whether it's aggregators, VPPs, or whatever, that are focused around them making money, the money they made and the money they paid one consumer has got to come back from the pool of consumers, which bizarrely includes the person who got that part of that share. So there's some bigger issues we need to take that we can deliver. So moving forward into that is, and we should, I think we've got to get a much clearer role and understanding of our networks being able to be participatory in helping consumers, because we pay the bills. All the bills the consumers pay out of the networks, and their focus needs to be more on helping us. And we need to communicate to people about saying, if you don't have flexibility, so James is right, I talk a lot about flexible pricing. Not everybody should be exposed to flexible pricing. Only those people with flexibility, and ideally just for their flexibility. I think that covers my part of that.
Thank you, Tim. So there's another "and we should" there, which is actually developing some sort of pricing or economic model for a network, which ties in with the architectural model, which ties in with simpler.
Which went to my question that I did ask Daniel. You know, how do tariffs play a role in this? And at the moment, the AER model around tariffing and our rate of change is every 5 years, and you can only change a bit. We don't have time for this. The demand side management, the demand side and integration, or let's just say the other 300,000 generation points that Ty talked about, they're actually consumption points, the generation points, they're everything. How do they integrate?
Great. Tim, if you could pass the microphone to your left. Mal, I'm sorry, Mal, I didn't ask you to introduce yourself before.
Oh, sorry, Mal McEwen. I'm the CEO of Combined Energy. On system architecture, as I said, I think the architecture should follow the electrical topology. So the natural extension of that is, I think the DNSP should be responsible for backhaul. And because they're the ones benefiting from the command, or going to be executing on the command and control. They're also the one we all need. We need it to be a secure link. We need it to be an always up link. It's the consumer at the moment, and companies like mine, we're responsible for keeping that link up and providing the data for free to the DNSPs. So I think that it's a non-trivial problem, but if we don't sort this out, it's going to be there forever and ever, and this is the bit that's where it's all going to fall over. I believe this concept of CSIP is a good focal point for that. We've got the concept of a CSIP gateway that sits in the home, which becomes the energy management system, becomes the security access point for all command and control into devices in the building or home. I think there's a really interesting exercise in how do you create that communication network from every home in the street that's at a transformer, because a logical place to aggregate those is back at the transformer, so that that transformer can be monitoring its voltage and telling everybody in real time, shut export down. It doesn't even need to be a full server technology, and obviously that can also go with the energy pooling, and that whether it's done at the transformer or up at the substation level, wherever there's a logical place to collate put the community batteries. It can then look at and monitor who's contributing energy and who's taking energy out, and that's all independent of the retailers. It's got to be done at a lower level. So I think that's a logical place. We've had a lot of trouble with CSIP even getting across all the DNSPs in Australia for anyone to take on the PK or the key infrastructure, the PKI infrastructure. So I'm not very hopeful that that'll happen, but I do believe that it should be part of their responsibility. There should be an Ethernet port sitting in everybody's meter box, which is managed by the DNSP, and we create a system behind that Ethernet port. The smart meter shouldn't be the backhaul. It should just be a device that hooks into that Ethernet port like every other device in and around the home.
Great, thank you. Now, is that a standards group or an industry working group, or is it a?
Well, we've been trying. I had hair when I started this this debate. We've tried. We've had trouble even in the last 7 years to get people to understand the requirement for open protocols behind the meter for every device. There are still many, many devices that are getting sponsored by governments, subsidised by governments, that are closed, that you can't integrate, batteries in particular. We've got people where they're now complaining because their battery discharges into their EV because we can't tell the battery to stop doing that, into their water heaters, etc., all these other storage. It's a perennial problem. There are standard groups working on it now, but I believe that it's a very piecemeal approach. I was hoping PSE would be the group that, with its ITC heritage and background, would be a really good voice for this and a really good vehicle. Probably AER in combination with PSE would be a good combination.
Thank you very much, Mel. That's a really good, and we should. I mean, it's starting to sound like something very, very concrete. Can we get the microphone back to the Honourable Kate Lundy, please? It may seem like an unfair question to ask Kate about regulatory simplification, but given your long experience in federal government.
Yeah. Look, thanks, Ian. And I do feel out of my depth from a energy markets point of view, but I've just got some conceptual points I'd like to make, and one of them is the celebration of complexity in our energy markets. In a way, that becomes a pressure, if you like, to maintain that complexity across the legacy players, and I think in and of itself, that works against removing the regressive character of implementing new technologies in our, energy systems for lower socioeconomic folks. So the big systems of distribution themselves become the protection of the legacy system, because it evens out the services to lower socioeconomic areas or individuals or areas that are unable to invest in, a beautiful CER pond. And I think we need to be mindful of that going forward. My ancient experiences in telco. And the mechanism for evening out that socio-economic balance in legacy systems was, of course, the universal service provider concept. And in the investment in new systems, is there a place for addressing some of those social inequities across the introduction of new technologies that do make it more cost effective? So that's a very high level concept, but I'm just conscious of the complexity of our legacy systems and the adherence to working within that to innovate and change and adapt. I don't know how to get around that except to start, focusing in on some of the areas that you're talking about and actually taking on that complexity and beating it. So I want to say that the fulfillment, the solving for communities separate from the grid, to me is the exemplar and worthy of continued pursuit. I know you all know a lot more about that than I, but I think that's a great way to tell the story of the difference. And I love Ty's stuff about, matching the physics to the markets and actually telling that real story, because that to me, really separates and rejects that complexity of the market that everyone is just forced to consume, and it becomes impenetrable. And so did you get your hot water becomes the question, as opposed to are you paying too much and are you getting ripped off by the systems within systems within systems. So I think what to do about this, I think continue to create incredibly independent exemplars of access, and to consider those communities that are most unable to tap into those kinds of resources, and look at what solutions can be found there through into the right kind of interventions. We're going to spend a lot of energy on fixing and intervening and adapting old systems, which I think will have to be done anyway. So I don't have a simple answer, but there's 3 bodies of work there within that, and most of it you're already doing. So well done.
Thank you. We're going to pass the microphone back to Tim. Tim will have a Slido question, I assume.
I do have a Slido question, but I want to
Then we're going to open up to this side of the room for questions, comments, contributions. So Tim, give us a Slido question.
If I can just pick up on what Kate said first, because if we try and find solutions to address the disadvantaged, to get them to do something, it's the wrong solution in my opinion. And I'll build on that by saying we only need 15 to 20% of the people with flexibility. And remembering most of the people that are low socioeconomic or whatever have little to no flexibility. If we get the people with it, it will lower the whole bills. And that comes back, part of the point I was saying before is don't try and value stack to this, but say to people, this is what you need to do that will save you money and deliver a community benefit, and explaining to people that this is how it works. Our community pond becomes something we swim in. It's not necessarily that we're trying to use it or do whatever. It's something that we can build on. It might freeze over. We can skate on it if we're in North America. So those sorts of approaches are what we need to do. And that's the benefit. Now, Simon English has asked a question here which sort of goes into part of this. This is the market is retailers, generators and transport, so distribution and transmission. Consumers are not part of the market. The fundamental shift is allowing consumers directly participate in the ponds without them having to go to the retailer aggregator. How do we do that? Does anyone want to have a go?
It's Ty responding. Do I stand? I don't know. I'm not sure whether the problem is the retailers or the problem is the attitude of some of the retailers and their main focus. And really picking up what Kate, you were saying in particular, there may be a desire to turn the world upside down here, but I'm nothing if not a pragmatist. And I just don't think you can, much as I might like to in my own disruptive DNA, abandon all current status quo. I think the real issue is, what about a community retailer? What about a retailer that was set up such that its ownership structure is all of the people who are customers of the retailer, such that, and it aims to break even or make a little profit. And when it does make a little profit, that's distributed back to all of the members at the end of the year with a small dividend. That uses entirely and is entirely achievable within the existing framework and regime. So the problem wasn't retailer, the problem was retailer with an obsessive and velociraptor-like focus on gouging consumers for money and making profit. So set up a retailer that doesn't have that as its ethos, and therein lies much more pragmatic pathways forward for us, I would say, in answer to that.
Thanks, Ty. All right, cool. One more online question, and then we will open up. So, Tim.
So, oh, gee, there he goes. Just highlight that, move it to the top. So Bill Wood asks, so we need to move from utility managed in imaginary or virtual ponds to a true decentralised approaches. To unleash innovation around CER local energy ponds, we ought to have open systems with appropriate security and provision methods. Standards need to facilitate, supposedly there's a second part of the question, but I can't spot it. But so I suppose the question is really where do standards fit in, which might be right up your alley.
We'll let Mal answer that one.
The extension 2 down.
Here it is. A real-time data exchange, analysis and control will be essential, particularly to minimise the barriers to participants and accelerate innovation. Where do these things stand around standards? Any leading examples, and what is the status of these things?
Any takers? Mal, interested?
Yeah, it's in a mess, basically. The standards are there. It's just that people have been allowed to bypass the standards with the sort of concept of it's early technology. We need to have proprietary systems because we don't want people doing something weird to our batteries. And I just respond, well, you've got a bad control system. Interestingly, in the US, the governments over there have now mandated local open interfaces to all DER, or you don't get a cent from the government. We're still debating it over here, and we're still handing out millions and millions of dollars to, and there's 2 or 3 battery vendors that are just conning everybody here. Yet in the US, they've already got an open API. It's published. They turn it off when they bring the products into Australia. So it's purely marketing.
That sounds like an interesting. We should. That's potentially something we could advocate for in terms of appropriate advocation. That is something we could potentially advocate for. Okay, folks, you've had fair warning. Question time. If you could just very quickly state who you are and where you're from.
Hi, my name's Greg Knight. I'm part of the Renew Illawarra network. So we've put, my colleague and I, Neville, put at least 5 submissions to government inquiries on power. I'm also a part of the E2515 Electrify Everything, so I get to talk to your customers. We've explained how the power system works using pub talk diagrams like Ty's, and once they understand what's going on, they're pretty fired up, and they want the local energy zones. So it's very pleasing to see what you guys are doing. It's very frustrating that it's only a bit of maths that can make the retailing go in our favour. So we're looking for a way of doing that without having to dive in. I'm way past working time. Why should us citizens do it? We need these community retailers. So, and we should provide a mechanism that we just asked Alison Byrne yesterday. Could you fund community networks? So we should provide a facility where citizens can go and plug into that, but not actually have to run it. And also, there's an issue about education. We need simple education for our people. We can educate them and they fire up. They don't know what's going on most of the time. Thank you.
Excellent. Another question?
Thanks, Ian. Tanya Jones from Green Gravity. We're an energy storage company that's looking to repurpose mines to store energy. I should be sitting on that side. But look, no, the question I think comes back to the consumer centric. I've worked with data my whole life, and data is only useful if you draw insight from it and if you can communicate and it can change behaviour or inform decisions. So I think we have a real opportunity and a need to rethink the way in which we engage the conversation around energy. We have stickers on all our appliances where we've taught the community around energy efficiency. We need to turn that on its head in terms of now there's a Pareto of devices that can become energy generators, but we need to do it in a way that can engage. And I just wanted to draw an analogy to answer what we should do. We either have watches or phones that are now giving us diagnostics on our health, that are telling us to close rings, that are telling us how our heart's going, how many steps we've taken. We're using data to actively change the way that we live, but we've made it accessible and we've made it fun. We need to do the same with the way that we think about our relationship with energy, and it needs to be at the start of the conversation. I get the architecture, but the data is only going to be good if it's used to change behaviours and to help make decisions. So that's what we need to do. Thanks.
Hi there, my name's Charles. I've been working in the solar and battery industry for about 10 years, selling predominantly solar and battery systems to consumers, and I've spoken to thousands and thousands of, thousands of consumers who've bought solar and battery systems. And what I really want to reiterate here is what Greg, I think, said before, and I think what I think we should do, or what PSE could do, is educate the wider community in the same way that Ty explained to us here how the energy market works. Because like what Greg said before, that will get the community fired up about doing something about it, and it will be the consumers that then drive which of all of these things is the best thing for them. Because if they understand how that mechanism works, how the distributors work, how the retailers work, and how they make their money, they do get frustrated. And it is a difficult thing to explain. So, but explaining it in a layman's term where people understand how that market works will allow them to make the decisions that are right for them, whether it be control mechanisms in their home, turning things on and off, whether it be just to buy batteries and not have to worry about when they turn things on and off and let the battery and the solar do the job, whatever it might be. But they can lead the way if they understand how it is, and they will get fired up if we can educate them. So my thing would be we should educate the wider community on the energy market, and they'll work out what's best to do from there. Yeah, well, that's the next question, I guess. And that is, again, I mean, what Ty did, whether that is, producing content that is understandable, that people gravitate to. But that's probably a starting point where you do have at the moment in the solar and battery space, the conversation is controlled by, a few big organisations, and in the energy space, it's mainly controlled by the brands and what should I buy, and should I get this one or should I get that one, and this one does this and this one does that. So trying to take that conversation away from that and more about how we do it is, but yeah, how to do it is another question. Yeah, but.
Let's let a response happen first. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Just on how we should educate people, there's a organisation called Local Energy Hubs trying to get government sponsoring. If we had private, and they're geared up to deliver that message.
Right. All right. So do you want to respond to that comment? New topic. Okay, well, we're going to take one Slido question, and then we'll come back to a new topic. Just if you can hang on to that.
Gavin Walker asks, would it make inner city energy expensive where there is little local generation? High density have low generation, even though it could have good storage. Anyone wants to? How do we address that? How do we have different ponds with different depths?
I see. Oh, please go ahead.
It's already partly being addressed by virtual energy networks that a couple of retailers are working on. So when NoC, I think it is, has a product that Momentum and one or two other retailers are using, where they're notionally, it's not electrons, it's notional, it's an accounting piece. And so it is possible to be done now. I think there needs to be reform that allows it to go cross-state and cross retailer, but the foundations are already in there for that type of product.
Great. That was very convenient. Thank you for answering. Ty, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
Sorry, Jeff. Yeah, can confirm University of Wollongong is one of Momentum's virtual energy network consumers. In fact, we may have been the organisation that encouraged them to develop that as a retail model where they had a good first taker to take it up. So yeah, we're all in.
So there's a number of parties that
both of you. Daniel, since you've got the talking stick.
Oh, no, I have. Just quickly, and Anosi was another one that has done that. There's a number of parties that are trying to do as a retailer, because retailers can do almost anything except do what they should do, which is help consumers. So they actually have this ability of being able to do back-end transactions, make things magically go from one customer to another customer. One of the opportunities with virtual NIMIs, if the networks applied that logic, is it would happen for every retailer and every consumer would be empowered, which is why I talk about that a lot. And I think we need to think about those solutions, because retailers, by necessity about what they do and what they try and do and manage the risk, is all around hedging and services that drive that. And that's a fundamental problem where they're trying to derive solutions that deliver it.
Okay, thank you very much, Tim. So Daniel, you wanted to start a new topic?
Yep, thank you. We've talked a lot about innovation today, and a lot of the innovation solutions exist in Australian technology startups. Unfortunately, there's a massive blocker in that. If you're an Aussie startup, virtually your only route to getting money is VCs or something like that, or if you're really unlucky, CVCs. And that's painful as a startup. We've gone through it. It almost kills you getting it. And then once you get it, you stop being a tech innovation company. You start being a 10x revenue company, and that's your only mandate, because that's what you have to do. Conversely, or on the other side at the same time, you've got Arena, who have given hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of millions of dollars to the type of retailers that we've discussed today, who make too much money anyway. Some aren't even Australian entities, who are incentivized to roll out non-Australian hardware into homes. And I just find it astonishing. There's a real action that possibly people right next to me, but other people in the room could lobby for, of why is, and we've gone through the Arena process, it's disgusting and horrible, actually. It really makes you feel dirty. And it's so disheartening. I've used much more robust words than that in private sales. But it's so disheartening to see money go to organisations that don't need it, and we're going to do it anyway, and not have startups get money. And there's a really easy business model where we could do that. If you gave $1 million to 200 startups, you change the entire world, as well as the money going back into the economy. It will pay for itself 3 times over. And I think it's a really worthy conversation to have.
Great.
Yeah. I completely agree. I think Open APIs is a great place to start, because that at least allows the opportunity for innovative companies to participate and get access to data. So there's a whole series of sort of, regulatory elements that can make innovation more possible across. On the issue of maturity of our venture capital markets or our, angel investors, it's a chronic problem, and it's affected every major technological trend we've experienced in this company. But there's another issue that affects us, and that is, from a global perspective, our relative lack of scale for these innovations. I don't think that's so much the case when you look at the scale of the Australian energy market. So there's an inverse opportunity to be able to provide resources for companies who are able to participate as innovators. And we've already seen, you know the list better than I, of the efforts gone to by the incumbents, generalising, I know, to close those doors and to actively use their lobby and the regulatory mechanisms and the standards mechanisms and their just sheer presence to keep those doors shut. So PSC's got a long and proud history of challenging those behaviours, and I think, all power to PSC for continuing to do so in this sector.
Between the two of you, could I get it, and we should?
Well, and we should articulate what we need to do Precisely. I think what we need to do is to ask the organisations that do have those financial resources to compartmentalise a bucket. And it should accompany with some, open API sort of standards to press the point. So it's not just a fake thing.
Okay, so the Christmas tree of hands has gone up. We're going to pass to Ty for a moment. Just in the meantime, while we're waiting for me to walk over to Ty, who in the room has ever invested in a startup? And please, same question online. Who online has ever invested in a startup?
I have an embarrassment of microphones. Okay, I'm going to put my hand up as well, by the way. Okay.
And Tim, could you give me an estimate from online? Anybody online put their hand up if you've ever invested in a startup? And you can give us a number a little bit later. Okay, all right. Perhaps Colin, if you could just check that. Anyone online who's invested? All right. Just a small pause, please, Ty.
Just riffing off there in terms of, and we should, as a community, as PSC, as everyone else, be advocating. We've spoken here a lot about the absence of a voice of society, consumers, heck, even business. Excuse me, sorry. In particular, in the regulatory space and the regulatory reform. It's important to remember that if we have a look at the boards that make up the control of, or call them the A team, the Australian Energy Regulator, the AER, the Australian Energy Market Operator, AEMO, and the Australian Energy Market Commission, the AEMC. In varying degrees, the boards of all of those entities are made up from incumbents or representatives of the incumbents. Heck, for AEMO, it's even encoded within their strictures that 40% of their funding and 40% of their board membership are people who are from the market and market representative entities. This is why this is a self-referential system at the moment and a self-perpetuating system. And we should be screaming from the rooftops. We need that balance to change. Not the one token consumer representative that's on the boards. We need the board to be dominated numerically by consumer representatives. And that's where we're going to get real change.
There you go. Well, that struck a chord. Okay, we are getting pretty close to time, and I know there's lots of folks who want to ask questions and say things. Just around the table before I hand over, out of Tim and Malcolm and there we go. Yes, please.
Sure. I was just going to add to the point before. So Endeavour's doing a lot of good things with innovative startups. I appreciate we've got big buying power as well. So there's always more we could be doing. But just the point to all of our uniqueness in Australia and the challenges we're facing here, it's a quite important opportunity for us to have that global leadership that you referred to at the start. And our experience has been that working with small startup organisations that are locally based is you get much more positive results because they're responsive to our needs in terms of, so I'm talking here specifically about some of the projects we work on with the likes of GridSight, where there's things that are unique to our context in Australia that we need these problems solved. But if you're dealing with the big multinational companies that have pipelines that are dressed down of Europe in terms of the development pipelines, that's a real challenge. So certainly echoing that sentiment as well.
Right. Now we've got a question live in the room. Tim, if you could just be brief and we'll pass the microphone back.
So on the ARENA question, ARENA has a policy that says someone comes to them with a plan and a bucket, half full, three-quarter full bucket, which they might top up. Approaching ARENA with an idea or something that needs and says, you find this, is something they cannot do. And it's a fundamental problem. To go to the point that James made, some networks are doing things different. And for example, with the 2030.5 CSIP stuff that was been central to this discussion here, a number of the networks have gone with GE, an American company, as a supplier with all sorts of problems, while we've got one of the best developers that are providing services, for example, to Endeavour, which has switched in, which is an Australian company delivering uniquely Australian solutions. So we have, I don't want to sound like Trump, but we actually need to actually have some of the things that go on here that are just, anyway, so leaving that thought there, we really need to work out how we can get the innovators to be front and centre and to get some of these solutions out there, because the solutions are there, the people are here, the data's here, the technology's here, all these things are here. We just have some opposition, and some of those are because it's international companies. Do you want another question from the Slido?
question behind you. If we could just take that one first, and then we'll do the Slido question, and then we're going to start need to wrap up. And we need to get a little bit more pithy in our questions and responses.
Phil McRae from PSC, retired but active in the PSC Foundation. I buy power from Amber, who are a wholesaler, and one of the things I enjoy doing during a day is seeing what the forecast prices are. So at the present moment, it's 14 cents, but at 6 p.m. night, it's going to be 100 times that at $16. A moment ago, it was $20. Providers dimension for the maximum expected capacity. So if we can focus through our local energy pools to knock the edge of the demand time between 5 and 7 p.m., then the overall price will come down. Providers actually like are insurers. They take a risk. Because the average price on a sunny day in summer for power is close to zero between sunshine hours, and then it goes up overnight. In winter, and for some reason tonight, they're forecast it's going to be exceptionally expensive. Let's focus. Let's not boil the ocean. Let's just focus on the demand time and seeing what we can do to minimise that through the local energy pools.
Thanks, Phil. All right, we'll take a question from online. We'll take one question from the room, then we're going to have to wrap it up. So, Tim, select the most important question that you've got in front of you.
Oh, I've gone through and highlighted one, so hopefully it's still the most important. Do you think the main issues around end customer pricing is actually retailers, or is it more a combination of generation plus retail, the big three? Creates misaligned incentives, generators want to be high. How can local energy pools help better align incentives?
James, got to answer.
I think part of, and maybe where I started this morning was around the opportunity. If you plan this stuff locally, then you can get more energy online. And as I sort of said, like our whole plan at the moment to get to 82% renewable energy in the electricity market by 2030 is through renewable energy zones, which take a lot of time. So I think one of the potential big benefits here is getting more supply on, more low cost renewable energy supply on, but also if you're planning locally, you can do more to manage local constraints, and that'll mean better value and direct value for customers.
Could you get really specific with it?
Sure. So our position is definitely that there's a lot of maybe conjecture around what control of people's solar would be in the future as well, because we're growing in a world where, increasingly there's more and more solar on the networks, but it doesn't have a price signal other than what Ty's just explained the retailer has. And we've got a market working on the other side that's trying to solve price signals and other things. A lot of the factors of safety that networks put in around the limits for which solars can export into the grid were just that, factors of safety and static. But we're now in a world where we can dynamically look at what the local hosting capacity of those networks can be. So what a dynamic operating envelope is, and we see our role in providing this dynamic operating envelope, is a ever expanding and contracting envelope of what the local hosting capacity of the network is in an electrical sense. And the reason to do that is then customers can get away from, being unfairly constrained just because the 5 kilowatt static limit was what was the old rules, and potentially export up to 10 kilowatts in that case. But similarly, and this is the trade-off, when we need to run them back to 2 kilowatts when we've got times of excess solar capacity on the network, and that's undue. We've been going through a big process with installers, which has been a group that, Endeavour hasn't worked too closely with before. But it's a big initiative and a big undertaking, but it's a pretty radical transformation. It is also a very complex thing for customers when we're talking about, control and command of their devices and their investments as well. But it's something that's being done to make sure that there's upside for customers, but also a sustainable growth for what all this CER is as well. And as Tim's pointed out as well, once you can do that for exports, it's a very important opportunity for imports. And, anyone that's done the principles on energy system design on the load side is where actually the money can be made on the first instance as well. And I'm appreciate I'm sitting between two load management companies too. So probably in a good company.
Okay, we're basically on time, but we do need to wrap up. So there's a couple of really important things that have come from this conversation around those and we shoulds. The architecture, I think, is a really, really interesting point. Some value stacking, economic modelling is a really interesting point. There's a great paper by Ron Ben Davis, which is worth reading and thinking about the economics of the energy sector. Simplifying the regulatory environment is a challenge, and of course that will be a challenge, in particular if we don't have things like an architecture model, if we don't have an understanding of things like value stacking, if we don't have an understanding of dynamic envelope. So I think there are some really good and we should. There was also some really, really good potential advocacy points about investing in SMEs, about API availability, about not turning things off, using Australian technology. So these conversations are always quite frustrating because just as it's getting going, just as we're starting to get into the substance of it, we end. That's unfortunate, but we do keep the conversation going. As mentioned, this is 5 of at least 6. The 6th planned one is coming up later in the year, date not currently set. But the intention is that we take all these and we shoulds and put them into a set of recommendations. We're also looking to highlight who's doing the doing. And so obviously the Innovation Centre here is doing some doing, CSIRO doing, and a whole lot of other folks are doing. We're also looking to highlight those who are enabling others to do the doing. We're looking to identify where there are environments to try, test and learn, because honestly, just finding people in the network that you can innovate with is often very challenging. And we're looking for appropriate areas that we can advocate for, such as what we've just heard. So folks, I'm going to say thank you very much for the active conversation. We will capture the questions and identify what we want. Identify the issues in those questions as part of what we want to do. I would like now to hand back to Wayne, and then Wayne will hand to our host. So thanks very much. Thank you, folks.
Thanks, Ian, and everybody online and everybody here. What I heard today is very encouraging, and it highlights the dilemma we have as the PSC Foundation in Australia for. I mean, somebody needs to advocate for this stuff, but as soon as you advocate, you're put in a box, so on. So it's a double-edged sword. But when I look at the recent Energy and Climate Change Ministerial Council, and it says, amongst other things, they discussed natural disasters, consumer reforms to ensure affordability and equity in the energy system, the trends in emerging technology affecting Australia's energy markets, and I look who was attending. It was all government people. Everybody's well-meaning, but they ain't good enough, because what we're talking about here isn't on the table at these meetings. Now, we need to take a decision, and our committee will take a decision. Somebody needs to stand up and advocate. I've got a partial, I've got a sort of recommendation. Through Mr. Lundy's organisation, Reposit Power, as Dean Spacker-Bento is the CEO. He's very active in the Tech Council of Australia and his colleagues there, and they've recently set up an organisation called CETA, Consumer Energy Technology Alliance. And I've been involved with that from the outset. It's just been formed. So I think I will open up some discussions, and maybe the Australia 4 will have to separate from PSC, because we're not here to advocate. We're here to promote the industry and acknowledge without trying to take a political position. But I think in this case, we need to be very realistic about we talk amongst ourselves, but who's listening? We've been accused of, we're a bunch of engineers talking to a bunch of engineers, and that ain't going to progress anything. We have to get beyond that, and we'll do something about that. And so I got the message. So just in wrapping up, I want to thank the committee that I'm on and Ian leads. Ian's pretty he doesn't promote himself very much. And none of us on the committee do, but it takes quite a lot of organisation. We meet regularly to make this happen. And Jordan Green, who's on this session, how do you get all these emails and all that stuff? Jordan just happens to do that at night. And then there's Colin, who's running Slido. He's on the committee and he's very knowledgeable in this area. And then there's Tim. Well, we all know what Tim does, and his contribution is, unbelievable and provocative, and we need to do that. And then Ian and his intellectual background and his role in the last 15 years since he's been back in Australia at CSIRO and then in the New South Wales government. And his connection, he's on the board of Standards Australia, and now he's with the data. He's the data czar in Australia. We can make those connections, but how we turn from a talk fest to an advocacy role is challenging. So I want to thank Wollongong University and particularly Ty pulling this all together and everybody else that's been involved. It's been a great collaborative effort. Our next event, we hope, is in Newcastle. Ian and I and others were in active discussions with HunterNet and Newcastle University. And of course, many of us here know Alex Zielinski. He's the Vice Chancellor there. So I'm pulling his string at the moment. And CSIRO's Energy Group are up there too. So we've got a good baseline to start there. So we'll be in touch on that. And want to thank everybody for turning up today and for the support. We're not going to give in. We're going to keep doing more than just talking. We need to advocate. Thank you.
I'll say two. Okay, I'll keep this really brief because I'm now between everybody and lunch. So if I could just start by saying you've been very generous with your comments here today towards the University of Wollongong and me personally, but this isn't just faux humility. The reality is that none of today would have happened were it not for the involvement and the collaboration that is the Electrification and Energy Systems Network, part of the New South Wales Decarbonisation Hub. It was through them that we were introduced to PSE. It was through collaboration with them that we've hosted here today. Yes, we've managed here at the University of Wollongong to provide the room, the IT and the tech. We've even managed to put in a good order for the weather, and that's come through as well. But all of the logistics, everything that made this happen was down to Lucinda and Mark from the Electrification Energy Systems Network. The personal thanks there, I would also like to say, very important, and now it is the shameless plug part of it. I think with the wherewithal and with the, I was going to say horsepower, but I'll say gigawatts of capability that we have in the EESN, a collaboration of many universities, of which University of Wollongong is but one, UNSW taking the lead. I would strongly suggest that therein lies something that can be tapped into by way of talent and resource and capability to really do the what ifs and really progress a lot of the so let's do it challenges that we've discussed here today. That's why we've been so enthusiastic in this collaboration, and so I'd certainly put that front and centre in everyone's minds as my closing comments. Sorry for those of you who are online. We won't mail the sandwiches out to you. I don't think they'd quite survived the journey. But for everyone else, again, thanks to the EESN. We've got a light lunch for those that wish to stay and continue to network. Thank you all for coming to Wollongong. Thank you all for dialing in online. Have a safe weekend.
So I thought